listeners, and welcome back to Horrifically Well Read, Bled, and Said. I am so pleased to introduce you to Lauren, who is our guest today, who is a brilliant neuroscientist turned exclusive horror bookstore owner in the New York City area. And we are going to talk about all things of transitioning from one career to the next, being bold enough to become an entrepreneur, to create a community space like this, her overall vision, and how you can support independent, awesome bookstores like these. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you. We met you at StokerCon, and Adam's like, hey, she was doged. We should talk to her. And I was like, cool. Yeah, I definitely want to. And then I was like, wait, have you ever read the book When the Breath Becomes Air? And you're like, yeah, that's the reason I didn't go into medical practice. And so I just felt immediately drawn to you. And Adam's like, she's opening a bookstore in New York City, Twisted Spine. I'm like, okay, I am all in here. I'm locked in. So I'm so glad we ran into each other.
Yeah, me too. No, it was really fun chatting. I had a great time at StokerCon.
I'll tell you what, I felt like there were so many authors that were just delighted to meet you and couldn't do enough to want to support you. And maybe that's just like the interactions I was like trying to eavesdrop on, or no, just like witnessing. But what was the experience there? What was the support?
You know, honestly, the support at StokerCon and everywhere has been so overwhelmingly positive. It's been very encouraging for moving forward with the store. You know, not coming from a business background and doing something, you know, that I don't know if everyone would consider opening a bookstore as a, you know, wise business move. Having people, you know, be excited and being really interested in the support that we got from Kickstarter and everything definitely gives me a lot of like, motivation that I think that the store is going to do really well once we get up and running.
Yeah. I know, like, when I talked to you, you were like, I'm working like 16-hour days. Are we still at that level right now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's
okay.
Especially with the September opening right now, it's definite crunch times, trying to get everything done, juggling out everything.
Yeah.
But so far, it seems like we're on track. So I'm cautiously optimistic that everything we should be good to go.
Good. It's hard because people's definition of spooky season starts so early, right? Like we went past a sign the other day, it was like fall beers are here and like some pumpkin spice stuff is out. And like,
yeah,
I mean, if you're like people that start celebrating Christmas start in like early October that are Christmas lovers. So Halloween lovers, I feel like can start in August as well. So I love that you're getting out plenty of time and early among like, I think the middle area. We were talking about that of like who considers spooky season, like September's a great fit. So I'm glad that it's on track for you.
Yeah, no, it's been crazy. I think this summer in particular is the first one I've really seen a boon of like Summerween as well. I mean, people were starting right after July 4th, which, you know, is great to know for next year. You know, I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun stuff we can do with the shop. But I was not expecting it to even start as early as it has, at least for the Halloween season. So just goes to show that there's a good appetite for the spooky.
Oh, yeah. I've had in the last few years a tradition of going in on July 4th to the gas station or convenience store because never fails on July 4th, the Reese's pumpkins are out. And
yes.
I know it's like as soon as I see those pumpkins, you know, it's always spooky season in this house, but definitely once they come out, it's very exciting. So if we can go back, let's start from the beginning. What is your, like, as you're starting a bookstore that is, you know, horror and dark literature, where did your relationship with both of those things start? How long have you been a fan?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I feel like a lot of people are, you know, diehard, like born and raised horror. I kind of got into it a little bit later in life. So for me, I got into horror when I was in the middle of my PhD in neuroscience, and I had long days in lab and, you know, like 15-hour days there as well. And I just needed something to help break up the monotony of doing the experiments. And so I started listening to horror fiction podcasts like Magnus Archives, Old God of Appalachia, Welcome to Night Vale. And those are the things that really, I think for me, opened up the rabbit hole for horror. Like, you know, as a kid, I had read Stephen King and like I'd read spooky things. I always felt drawn to spooky stories, but I didn't really, you know, really find my passion until my PhD. And I, you know, was in New York City and I was like, well, you know, I really would love to find some horror literature to read, you know, listening to all these podcasts. There's got to be a bookstore devoted to horror because, you know, in New York, you can find those kind of specialties everywhere. And I was really surprised when I realized that there wasn't anything. You know, we have the Mysterious bookstore here, which is great, but they kind of focus more on, like Sherlock Holmes level mystery. There's the Rip Bodice, which is the romance specific, but there's nothing specific for horror. And that kind of really stuck with me when I finished my PhD. It was kind of lurking in the back of my mind. And I was talking to my partner, Jason, about it. And he's like, you know what, does sound like a really great idea. So we decided to kind of start doing some pop-ups around the city, see if there was any interest. At that time, I got my first job outside of my PhD, where I was working for the National Institute of Health, specifically the National Institute on Aging. My neuroscience background's on Parkinson's disease, so the National Institute of Aging was a good fit. And so we started doing pop-ups around the city. It was a great response. And when this February, along with a lot of other people, I got doged. And based upon the amount of people that had been turning out for the pop-up events, I talked to Jason. I was like, well, what if we move forward with doing a brick and mortar store? And originally our plan, was to wait up, probably 5 years, of doing the pop-ups before we move forward with thinking about doing a storefront. But having the, impetus of I think that for me too, is building a safe space, a community space for horror lovers in the face of a lot of real life horror was something that was really important to me. And with the administration change and everything, I felt like we needed it even more than ever. So it's kind of a two-part, let's speed up time with the bookstore and let's build this space where, community is more important than ever, where we can all come together and have with this shared love of things on the dark side and support each other through real life horror.
I love that. And it's really interesting that as soon as you started sort of seeking out, and I think that's a great, as you are sort of initially seeking out horror literature and where to buy it, it's it's great to have, all these other bookstores and even, Barnes and Noble and other independent bookstores that are really fantastic in the city. But when you're I want a store that seems like they know what they're talking about when it comes to this, I love that you immediately were there is a hole here that someone's going to exploit. And you're
it's me.
It's me. I want to do that. And so that's fantastic. And I'm just wondering too, as you are we're working in sort of the Institute for Aging, focus on Parkinson's. That's some Parkinson's. Yes. There's some real life horrors there, right?
Yes.
Do you think that sort of seeing those things kind of brought that bridge? We've seen a lot and talked to a lot of people talking about horror as this safe way to explore really dark and horrific things. Do you think that starting with those podcasts and then into the literature, that's kind of some of the way that you were looking at and using horror too?
Definitely, 100%. I think that there's a lot of conversations about there's a way of using horror literature, horror fiction as a way to process real life horror. For me, I wouldn't necessarily want to read a novel about a person with Alzheimer's disease.
Sure.
I have a grandma with dementia, living with that full real life. I know the science, did a lot of research on it. But if you're doing something more psychological horror and maybe there's some type of supernatural creature, you can still explore what you need to do to support people in that environment, but maybe it's not quite so on the nose in a way that you don't want to address just because it's a little too close to home. And I think that that's really helpful and powerful. I also think that one of the things I appreciate about horror and people who like the horror genre is their acceptance of death in general as well. Because I think that, especially in the American society, we really try to compartmentalize and isolate and kind of, ignore it as much as possible, pretend like it doesn't, it isn't there. But if there's one thing I would have to say that because horror is such a broad genre and it's really hard to define, all the subgenres, I think there's always this exploration of, of death in some capacity. That is what maybe is for me, the resounding thread of all the different areas. And I think that especially coming out of COVID has been really important. And I appreciate people who like the genre because I feel like they're more in touch with their own sense of mortality than maybe other people in the community. And I think that that's healthy.
I think that's a great call out.
Yeah. I think of, we've also, read about this and talked about it before. And even when we were at Stoker, a few of us went to a cemetery late at night, was ghost hunting kind of thing. But in previous generations, it was very normal to go have a picnic with, your loved ones that had passed away.
Exactly.
And death was not this sort of if you ignore it, it won't come for you or it doesn't exist, kind of thing. And, death is as much a part of life as birth is. And so,
It says guaranteed, right?
yeah, having a healthy view towards it not only is just like good for your mental health, but then also kind of like you said, it's like when you are aware of it in a healthy way, you are looking for signs of ways to help people, to help extend, that life that you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
When you aren't, living in this bubble with your head in the sand of like, if I don't think about it, I don't ever have to worry about it. So that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and I feel like what you said, like with the idea of like you were saying about like the dementia, or for example, or the Parkinson's, it's like you can court empathy, but you never have to, and you could try it on, but you can take it off at the end of the day, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
costume or an experience. It's not your everyday life. So I think that's intriguing to book readers, that they can have a little bit of an experience for things. Like we were talking with my friend group and she was talking about reading the book Roots. And she was like, that's one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life, because she's like, I will never be an African American. I will never have lived these things. And to have read like a tome of that size and go from, the beginning here to where it ends up, it's like she collects stories like that, that feels like she's
Yeah.
had these experiences. And so do I. And that's why we're friends and book friends, because you want something that kind of rips your heart out a little bit and is guttural and like really there. And that's what horror does so well. And it was funny because we were at her house and she didn't think she was a horror reader. And we were leaving and Adam's like, oh my God, she's like one of the biggest horror readers I know. She just doesn't know it, like at all. She has
Yeah.
all these books that are filled with horror. She's like, her books are horrendous. Like the things that she has.
From like obvious horror, like Bram, Dracula and Grady Hendrix, to other books that it's like, oh my God, like this is a horrifying book. Like, so, and that's one of the things, like the bridges. And I think that, a store like yours too, I think that maybe people are like, oh, I'm not a horror fan, or,
Right.
or they're like, I'm going to come in to see, just being curious. And I think that a lot of people are going to walk out with books.
Yes.
So that's really
100%.
cool.
Yeah. We're really, I think that also we want to keep a very broad definition of horror. I think a lot of people who don't know the genre, they just think Stephen King, like that's he's kind of like type style. But we're in such a, golden renaissance with horror and so many different cultures. And, I'm really excited because we're going to have a very extensive like translated horror section.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
stories from a bunch of different authors in different countries. Like I've noticed there's a lot coming out of like Japan and Korea and Argentina. It seems to be like a very strong suit right now. And you see them classified as like literary fiction oftentimes. And so we'll have like what we're calling our literary horror. But at the end of the day, it's still horrific. I mean, Tender as the Flesh is a pretty graphic, intense book. Yeah. And, but I think that it's interesting that it does straddle the line between what someone might consider more literary, political, versus like outright horror. And I think it's stuff like that that we're going to like try and help bridge the gap between people who might not consider horror like the type of genre, like, it's too lowbrow. And then we're also trying to do things for people who maybe don't have, the taste for something particularly graphic. There's a lot of amazing gothic logical books where it doesn't have to be, overtly gory, or maybe it's just like kind of like a cozy, kind of like eerie feeling. And that's horror as well. Like it doesn't have to be like it's something extremely intense, over the top, in your face. It can be just enough to be kind of, what I call mildly unsettling. And that might lead someone into...
It's a great label. Would you like to read a mildly unsettling book? Like, yeah, I think I could handle it. Because, like, I was just saying, like, you don't want to take people from their comfort zones to a panic zone. Like, you need to do the stretch. So, like, that is the stretch zone of mildly upsetting, or unhinged, or however you want to label it.
So I'm very excited. I'm hoping that we can really, a lot of people at our pop-ups were like, oh, well, I haven't read a lot of horror, but I'd love to get into it. And I'm excited to finally have the space to be able to like really have a whole table set aside of, okay, like if you're new, like here's some places to start.
I love that. Well, that's what I was really curious about, was like your curation of the store and like walking someone through it and like navigating. And, if you can't like address them and meet them head on and like give them that sort of like customer service up front, how do they browse? How do they find those things? Because you're right. The definition of horror is one that I was unaware of for a very long time. And I think the way you said it was so easy to say. It's so broad, and just like, how are you going to go through and navigate the store? Like one of the books that I was thinking was like when you were talking was like ring shout. Like that
Yeah.
could easily be historical,
Yeah.
like where, you know, it labeled with several different things, but it's like it also, and like Tanner Reeves does, the reformatory,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, it's like, so there's just, you know, and Octavia Butler for things. So I look forward to like the overall experience that you're going to give these customers too, because I feel like you're doing such good things with like helping to reverse the stereotypes. And I recently put up a post of like, oh my God, like I think I'm finally fully immersed in I've always been a horror reader, despite the fact that I didn't know it. And like, I love all these things. And it is not the stereotypes that you think of for the movies or the marketing or any of these other things. And I think a store like yours with the curation, the knowledge, the passion is going to change things for authors and bookstores and the community itself.
I hope so. You know, I would love, you know, and to be, you know, totally fair, we are not, you know, the first horror bookstore by a long shot. There's a lot of awesome
Yeah.
stores already. You know, like we got a lot of amazing advice from Little Ghosts in Toronto when we were first starting out, just thinking about, you know, doing the idea. I met the owner, you know, of Butcher Cabin Books. Like Jenny was also
Yep.
at StokerCon.
Mhm.
There's, you know, Buckets of Blood in Chicago, Dark
Yep.
Delicacies that just, you know,
Mhm.
that he just retired. But,
Mhm.
you know, there's been, you know, this, they've been there and they're doing like amazing work. I think that we're just, if we can, you know, make a splash here in New York City just by the presence of being in a bigger city, I'm hoping that that can also help spawn more horror bookstores across the country. I mean, because what I would love is to see more of these specialties, you know, take off. There's been this
Yeah.
huge boon of like romance specific
I
bookstores
was
doing
going to
very
just say
well.
that. Yes.
Yeah. And I would love there to be more horror bookstores, you know, or
Right.
anything sci-fi, you know, like if you wanted to go
Yeah.
down that role. Like I think the more genre specific, it allows you to open up into. But the problem, you know, I have so much respect for generalist bookstores after, you know, having to go through inventory.
Okay.
Just horror, you know, itself and trying to figure out like what to stock. You know, there's so many books out there. Like, how do you make those decisions? And I'm just looking at one genre. So if I was, you know, opening up a generalist and had to make the decisions on, you know, each different genre, it's overwhelming. It would be absolutely crazy. So I understand why they can't go into the same level of depth as you can
Uh-huh.
if you're picking the one genre. And so if
Uh-huh.
we allow more spaces where you can really deep dive into different areas, it gives better opportunity for underrepresented authors, indie authors. I think like, you know, most generalists don't really have space for a lot of these indie presses. And a lot of these indie presses are putting out such incredible horror right now. And I
Yeah.
really love, we've got friends at Shortwave, Creature Publishing, Clash, you know, Tenebrous Press is great, Apocalypse Party. There's so much good stuff. And there's so many more I could name.
Mhm.
So I'm just really excited to be able to like, you know, kind of go more deep into an area where as a generalist, you just don't have the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, and two questions, you know, that brings up for me. One, well, I guess it's kind of one question, two thoughts that lead to it. But when I go into a generalist bookstore, a lot of times I have to go into so many different genre spaces to find the authors that I like. Sometimes, you know, Rachel Harrison, for instance, you know, to come up with an author, I'll go in the horror section and So Thirsty and Black Sheep are there, but I have to go to the sci-fi fantasy section to find Cackle and Such Sharp Teeth, and it's just bizarre, you know, how
Yeah.
those choices are made. But then also Stephen Graham Jones, you know, the slashers will be in horror, but Mongrels is in literary fiction, you know, all
Yeah.
those kinds
Yeah.
of things. And so to have a space that like yours that is going to have all of those in one roof, because they are, you know, it says horror and dark literature. And I love that you have that specific, you know, thing in your title, because that's what it is really. It's not just, you know, when we think of horror, we think of something that disgusts us, right? You know, that's what that
Yeah.
word kind
Yeah.
of says. But dark literature, it's like it really is horror, but it might be something that, you know, gives a different emotional response and people kind of understand it more.
Yeah.
So my question is, as you, and I'm sure you do, but I just want to hear your thought process of geographically where you're putting what in the store. That has to be a very like specific and, you know, thought through process of where what is, and sort of how did you think about that? You know, I don't know exactly what the footprint of your store is, but when you walk in, what do you see? Where do you find
Totally.
different types of horror? Yeah. Can you talk about that?
And I heard there
Yeah.
was something potentially about like a bar and alcohol, or no?
Yeah. So not only is it going to be a bookstore, but we're going to be a full coffee service, and then also beer and wine. So we'll have
Nice.
a whole bar set up. It'll be, it's small. It'll be probably about like 10 to 13 seats, but we're really excited to have that, and then also have that available for different like community events and everything. In terms of
Yeah, I
the
remember you saying community events were very important to you.
Yes, we really want to be a home for horror. Like as my passion is
Cool.
definitely horror literature. Jason, my partner's passion is more cinema. So like we want, we also New York is an amazing theater community. Jason is a musician, so comes from like the musician world. We really want it to be a place where all different aspects of horror can be. Like not are we, the focus of the space has a lot of books in it, but we want, anyone who likes it from any type of arts to feel like there's an event there. Whether we're hosting an event for like, special effects, like VFX makeup or something, or a live recording of a horror podcast. I really want it to be a space for every type of art that enjoys, the darker side of life. But to get back to the question about like the store layout, it was definitely tricky. And I will say, hopefully this doesn't bother you too much, but my plan is to break up things by subgenre of horror. So
Yes.
authors will, I am planning on scattering them throughout different sections, not necessarily
I
keeping all the
love
books
that.
together.
I do too. I'm like, I think that's
So,
awesome.
Yeah. Because I'm hoping that if somebody, has an inclination for one subgenre, that maybe that'll kind of introduce them to authors that they might not have recognized because they kind of have thought of them in a different area. So the idea is like when you walk into the store, one of the first things there'll be is a table for people who are just interested in getting into horror for the first time, since we'll have a lot of people who I'm hoping are just curious. They walk in and so they have, something very accessible. On the left, there'll be a shelf with all the new releases. So going to try to really keep up with, especially this time of year. Oh my gosh, there's so many new horror books coming out.
Well, September
and then
9th, just by itself, I think there's like 15 or something like
it's
that.
crazy.
It's crazy.
All of September, it's a massive amount of books coming out.
Yes.
And
Perfect time
then
to open.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll just keep everything going. And then we want to highlight New York City specific authors. So we'll definitely have a section for that. And then probably our staff recommends also pretty close to the front. And then as you get into the store, like we want to have like a kind of a creature corner. So we have like kind of a monsters section, pretty broad, that can include everything from like, zombies, ghosts, vampires, etc. But we also are going to kind of break it into, we have a whole gothic section. We have a whole historical section, literary horror, translated horror, cosmic, eldritch, and then sci-fi. It is tricky. I will say a lot of things, you could argue could be in one section versus another. So I hope people don't get too, opinionated on our shelving choices. And
Oh, that never happens, right?
Yeah. We have like a comedy section, slasher section. I'm also excited because we're going to have a designated splatterpunk section as well as an erotica romance section. Yeah. So, and then also we're excited because we want to have a full, like a nonfiction film area, and nonfiction biographies and memoirs, like history of death, history of the occult, or kind of veering away from anything of like occult practices. I think that, if that's something people are interested in, that probably going to like more of a new age bookstore would be a better fit. Yeah. But we do want to have, like we'll have like nonfiction books about the different things, but maybe not so much a like how to magic book, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That does make sense. I'm just planning my shopping trip here as you're talking.
I know.
And then the other thing, like, so I love the idea that you're talking about the horror community and our people of, the more broader sense of people that are drawn to the darker things, the spooky things, whatever it is. And, going to Stoker and going to a lot of these different book events, like that is that sort of thing that is just, you can't put a finger on it, how wonderful it is to be around like-minded people. And
exactly.
So I love the idea that you're sort of creating something that you can have that any given day that you're like, I need some of that they can walk into your store.
My people.
You
exactly.
can walk into your store and have that.
Listen, some days even baddies get the saddies, and you can go to the bookstore and be with your horror people.
Yes, exactly. And so, I'm sure that you're already starting to plan specific events and stuff like that, but what does that look like One, what kind of events are you looking to have? I know you already kind of went into a little bit about that, but then two, like on just any given day, what is the feel? Because I think that, you talked about a lot of other horror bookstores and they are really great. And I saw the one that just opened in Houston, looks amazing. But from what we talked about at Stoker and what those are, I think that your feel is just a little bit different because I think those are so overtly horror. It's about having Michael Myers statues, and which is, all
Right,
those things are
right.
fantastic. But it sounds like your feel is a little bit different than that, and wanted to go into that.
Totally. Yeah. So I think for us, because we're trying to be welcoming to everyone, we're going with a dark academia vibe. So the idea is that when you come in, it feels kind of like a rainy day, like an Edinburgh pub. So like we're really excited. We have a fireplace that we put in that looks really nice. And we have like very large wooden bookshelves. We probably won't have it for opening, but we're planning to have a rolling ladder, attached to the bookshelves and in the back area. So what we don't want is we do not want it to feel like a Halloween store. Like it's not a place where you're going to have, animatronics, like popping out and that type of thing, which is totally fun in its own space, but it's just not really kind of the vibe that we're looking for. We want something to be cozy, comfortable, a little like eerie, but nothing's going to jump out at you. It's a place, the horror stays between the pages, and you can come and just, you could just come, and if you just enjoy the vibe, just, get a drink at the store, and you don't even, need to be, into, you might not have like even seen any horror movies, and that's totally fine. We want to be a space that's welcoming for everyone, and that anyone who just enjoys, a little bit spookier will feel welcome.
I feel like you're going to just hear it on repeat, like, wow, this store isn't what I thought it was going to be. Or like, I was expecting the things like that. And again, I mean, we just went to a really fun coffee shop that was like that in Indianapolis. And it was,
that was hitting you over the head with the horror.
But it was like, it was a lot of fun.
And it was awesome.
Yeah,
and if you're looking for that, it's amazing. But, if you're like, I want a bookstore, but I want it, like you said, like to feel a little bit darker, to feel a little bit spooky, like that dark academia, there's so many people that love dark academia that would never label themselves as horror.
Right.
Or a
Exactly.
horror reader or any of that kind of stuff.
I think totally. Like, people who are into dark fantasy or dark romance, they might not consider themselves horror readers, but that definitely has elements of horror in it. And so again, it's just that vibe of being welcoming to everyone. And that's something that I think is really important to Jason and I, is that, it's a space that anyone feels welcome. It's a safe space for, anyone who, feels, any type of minority, whether it's, in the LGBT community or in the, ethnic backgrounds. Like, it's a very polarizing time, and we just want this to be a space where everyone can feel, like to escape the real life horror for a second. That's truly what our goal is.
So for like the drinks, whether it's coffee related or beer, when not, will that stay sort of like, I don't know, like,
is it going to be themed
or will it have any kind of like a theme, or will you stay classic? Yeah.
We are working on some themes, so I think it'll be fun. We've been reaching out to some different pastry people. We haven't totally locked down what we're going to do, but we're hoping to have, like, one person came back with the potential of making, these little like fruit pies that are in the shape of like zombies. So like they'd like ooze out stuff. Like we have, another idea that they had was like a tarot, like blind box cookie. So you like get it and you don't know what tarot card you're going to get. And you open it up.
No way.
And then it'll like tell you like what your tarot card cookie is. I don't know. Those are just like a couple of her pitches ideas, and like they're incredible. We haven't locked anything in yet, but I think it'll be fun. There's some really creative ideas out there. And then I think we're going to do a pumpkin spiced latte year round, because why not? So that'll be fun. And then I think we'll do a couple different themed things as well.
Love that.
So
do you feel like you're opening almost like 3 different stores at the same time, when it's like, I imagine it's a whole other like set of skills and things to know, and, for that sort of side of it.
It's like, I'm glad we're doing it because, New York City is very, rent's expensive. You got to do a lot to be able to make it here. So I'm glad that we're doing the coffee and the beer and the wine. But yes, if it was just a bookstore, I think it would be a lot simpler in terms of just like all the balls to juggle.
But it wouldn't be as fun.
But it wouldn't be as fun. I'm very
excited. And you want people to sit there for the longer they sit there, the more they see that book that maybe they want to get and all that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So was there, like, when you were designing the vibe, was there anything that you've read in the past that you like helped you to envision the style for your store? Like, you keep talking about like dark academia, and I just recently read Cassandra Claus, the Library at Hellebore.
Oh yeah,
And I just think like the front of that book is like, it's so like atmospheric, right?
totally. You know, honestly, it really comes back to like the classics for me. When I
Okay.
went to London for the first time in like 2023 and seeing like just like the traditional like British pub, I'm like, it is just it's such a vibe. Like I just love all the wood and like the coziness, and like kind of the culture. You know, like with it being a cloudy, rainy day in London, and you can just like kind of like go in for like a cozy pint. But you know, that kind of the feeling of something gothic, of like, you know, whether it's Frankenstein or Dracula, just like that kind of I mean, even, you know, if you're like as a kid, like you see like Belle's Library, you know, and Beauty and the Beast,
Oh,
like there's
Yeah.
just something about that like leather armchair, fireplace, big bookshelves, you know, dark wood vibe that I just think is very
Oh yeah.
appealing to readers.
Hmm.
There's like, you know, especially in this day and age, I think that the traditional coffee shop that you go to is white, very like clean white straight lines, very bright, is kind of the
Right.
millennial modern look. And I just kind of, we want to be the exact opposite of that: moody, dark, yellow light, cozy, a
Mhm.
place that is just, you know, yeah, like it's just like walking into, I don't know, can't really have any castles in New York, but it's as close to like a castle library as you can get, I guess.
That's fantastic. I think that going back to what you said before, and something that we've talked, when horror comes up, gets talked about a lot, is that horror is one of those genres that gets that big O other, that the people that read it are othered, or put into this sort of stereotyped community and idea of who they are. And so the idea of having a place that you walk into and you don't feel like that at all, you know what I mean, that you feel like
Exactly.
I'm home, that I feel like this is a place for me, no matter who you are, I think is a really beautiful thing right now, and definitely a, a definite oasis and necessary in the times that we find ourselves.
Exactly. You know, a lot of times people say, like, you know, it's good to make the thing that you wish existed. And that's kind of been my gut with the store, is like, you
Yeah.
know, this is something that this is a place I'd want to hang out in New York. This is where I'd like to be.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm hoping, you know, by bringing that other people feel the same way.
So, two-part question. One, have you received any inquiries yet on people getting married at the store? Because I feel like that's like only too far away that, believe it or not, someone's going to ask. And the second part is, if no one has asked yet, we're coming up on our 20-year marriage anniversary. That could be a great vow renewal
Mhm.
area.
We could record a
Oh
podcast
my
and
gosh, we
renew
would
our
love
vows.
that.
I'm really serious though,
One of the things that
because
we
like,
hoped for is that, you know, we have the outdoor space and we have the setup that we would love to be able to host weddings and
yeah,
events
I
and
just feel
at
like
the
it
space.
sounds so dreamy, because how many people live in that space? Like, it was when you said like Belle's Library that it's like that, like, who cares if she's a princess? Like, that's not why we were interested, right?
Nope,
It was
exactly.
about
It is the
it was
library.
about the bookstore and the library and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I would imagine you see a lot of couples that attend and like these things. And I just feel like that would be an incredible source of income, but a lot of pleasure for you and your partner. And then probably for the people that, you know, are looking for something unique and different. And so, Adam, I know that we've been chatting about it for a while, so we should seriously follow up on it, because
Absolutely.
we did a 10-year vow renewal, and then we were like, we're going to do it at 20s.
I would be extremely honored if you guys did it at our store. So we'll definitely
I
have
feel
to
like
talk
it's
about that.
perfect. Yeah, I feel like it's so perfect, because like it, you know, when you're marrying someone, you have to fall in love repeatedly over and over again as you transition and change, because they're certainly not the same people. So, I mean, I know for some people they're like, oh, why, you know, I don't know, maybe in the past, in years past, people would be like, oh, they're getting a vow renewal because you can think whatever, you know, people want. But for me, you know, and Adam, it's like, it's always like, you have to choose to make that commitment every
Mhm.
time. And, you know, books were not this like massive part of my life for so long, because I just didn't have the attention span. Until I was properly medicated. And I always say that, but Adam's always had this. And so the fact that like, I feel like he's living in his favorite era or timeline of our marriage, because now I'm reading as much as him, and I'm reading the things that he loves too. And I chose them, like I was reading all that like literary nonfiction, all the human horrors and everything like that. And now I feel like I'm like a perfect person for what you're creating, as a side in your bookstore, because that's how I would have slipped into those things. Like I think if you would have beat me over the head, like I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Right. So I just feel like
Exactly.
you're allowing me to kind of like let it soak in, like, okay, you're kind of like I go a little bit further each time. But so yeah, the fact that this is our favorite timeline together, I think like it would be an awesome way to honor that.
Yeah, I love it. So we will definitely be in touch about that.
Amazing. Great.
So one other thing, something that is interesting to me as well to think about for a place like this, the other hat that you're going to have is boss, manager, whatever you want to call it, is hiring people and having a staff. I can only imagine that.
Do you want some tips on not what to do with
No.
million cashiers?
No. Curating people that fit your mission statement, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
trying to figure that out as you're, I'm sure there might be people that that,
No, I was saying this could be really fun. I'm in my head, I'm like, what rating did you give to this book?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. Yeah,
exactly.
it's like,
but no, but seriously, like, it is a very specific feel and mission statement that you have for this store, and finding people, especially when you're opening, I don't know what the staff will be like, but I would guess that there's a lot of people that want to work at a place like this, and digging through that to find the ones that are right to work at a place like yours could be kind of difficult.
Definitely. We're going to be definitely starting with a very small staff. Jason and I will be, working. I'll be at the store every day, pretty much. I think we'll be closed on Mondays is the plan, but every other day, I will either be lurking in the back or on the floor. And then, in terms of like the staff, I think the biggest thing that is going to be interesting is that, like you said, I think a lot of people are very excited to work here, but because we are doing the coffee and the beer and wine, like it won't be just your traditional bookstore seller. So it will have to be someone who's, willing to learn to do all the coffee, willing to do, bartending type things, willing to talk about books. So it will take a type of personality who will be, flexible on doing, it's not just books. It will also be like more of your traditional, like food retail experience as well. And then because we'll be starting small, it'll have to be someone who is willing to, be a little more independent and like willing to take up slack and like provide feedback and stuff when we're ready to, cause like it's Jason and I's first business. Like there'll be growing pains and like we'll have to learn the best ways of doing things. I don't come from a coffee or a bartending background. So like, I'm sure that there will be kinks that we have to work out. And so having people who are willing to be flexible and roll with the punches with that type of thing. But, New York City is a very large city. And I think that we won't have, like you said, we won't have trouble finding people who are interested in doing it. It's just narrowing it down. We've had people, reach out even when we were still in the pop-up stage saying like, hey, when you're ready, like I'm ready to be there. And so like, and they've continued to follow up. And, those are probably the type of people we'll look at first. But yeah, the hiring stuff is definitely a whole nother, figuring out, okay, you've got to figure out payroll, got to figure out taxes, got to figure out like workers' comp insurance. Like it is just another whole aspect of the whole, many balls to keep juggling throughout the whole process of opening up the store.
Yeah. Drinking from a fire hose because you're becoming like a overnight, at least not an expert at least, but like incredibly like sufficient, by learning everything yourself very quickly.
Yep. And in some ways, I do feel like the PhD did set me up well for that, because that is kind of like what you are expected to do in like a lab setting. And a lot of like what being a scientist is about is that you have to manage people, you have to set up a lab, you have to buy equipment and do all these types of things. I just decided to do it in a more fun setting of a bookstore versus, buying research equipment.
I love that like you can show that like the skills are transferable, right? Because I think there's just a lot of times where people don't want to be doing something the same way anymore, but looking at how you're drawing upon your experience for that to be an entrepreneur is awesome. I will tell you, for the years of being in marketing and sales, whenever we were taught to hire, it was always like, go to the bartenders first and try to get them to come into sales, because they're so naturally like, just sellers and people and pleasing and rapport. And just, I mean, the fact that you have that aspect there and someone, it's like, I think that they'll attract customers longer. They'll like, oh, I remember your name. I remember what you're in here for. And just, having that diversity of, okay, I can talk books, but I can also get you what you need here and do this and that. Like, I think you're right. Being in New York City, are much more likely, I think, to like find plenty of that. But I love that for you, because I think you'll be selling books while also selling the experience, while also people saying, I want to come back and continue to enjoy my time here, because of the type of, I don't know, I just feel like it's not going to be those awkward checkout people. Like, I was making a joke when I was like, what not to do. But there are times that we'll like wait to this one person is like going on break before we go and check out, because it's almost like that SNL skit on the Target woman where like she has to make a comment on everything at like at the counter when you check out, and it's like a good old 20 minutes. And then we've had other ones that just don't even acknowledge you, and they're just all having the conversation. And it's just, I don't know, man. Customer service, I guess at 41, I still like that, like I want you to sell me on something. I want you to position this. I want to feel like I matter. And like, books aren't expensive, but they're not cheap. And,
they can be very expensive.
They can be. Look, when we go, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be very expensive when you visit your store.
Yes, it will. I can almost tell you for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it's like you want people to feel good about it. So I feel like customer service, like whenever I would interview small businesses, and I would be like, okay, so what sets you apart from the other, 15 HVAC companies that are in this county? It's our service. If you look at our reviews, it's our service over and over again. And I just think like that's an area when you hire that it can set you heads and shoulders above any other place that people are spending their money.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
And so going back to the other thing that just made me think about it a little bit, I think when someone, especially someone that is new, maybe to, the genre that you're specializing in, when they go into a store like that, they're probably and rightfully expecting the people inside to be relative authorities on that subject.
Yes.
So, obviously you said the staff recommendations, like that's huge. I know, especially in indie bookstores, like those sell more than other things because people trust that the people there are going to know what they're talking about. And, I think that that's probably something that, when you go into an interview other places, I would just love to like listen to the interviews for staff there, because that's probably going to be something that you're...
Lauren, that's a Patreon idea. Would you like to hear our interviewing process?
I'm just saying. Like, because there has to be some sort of vetting to be like, obviously you wouldn't apply here if you don't.
That's what I was joking about, is saying like, she's like, what score did you give this book?
Yeah. No, there is some sort of like vetting of, that's going to probably happen, because if someone walks in and they're like, what's a good horror book? And they're like, I don't know, why are you asking me?
Yeah, so exactly. No, for sure.
That's really interesting. So, and I'm sure that that's one of those things where it's like, that's going to be part of the joy, all this other stuff. It's like, it's part of it and it's great, but like meeting people, whether it's customers or, staff, that it's going to become very family-like, because everyone does love the same things,
Totally. And, for me also, if I can get people on staff who don't read the same subgenres of horror as I do, that will be huge.
Masters of specific things.
So that way we can kind of spread out, the different, what people can talk about with different customers. Like for me, I am like, I'm probably the only white girl who's not a true crime girly. Like I don't know the like true crime stuff. And so but we're going to have, a true crime nonfiction section. And I was like, messaging my sister who's super into true crime. I'm like, okay, like what are the types of things that you would want to see at the store? So like, even just something like that, or the dark romance, I don't read a ton of romance books. And so having, someone who can talk more about that would also be huge. And then Jason is, got the lock on the cinema. And so thankfully, like he's very good with that type of stuff. But, there's just like areas there's so many different subgenres and things that it's always great to have. I volunteered at a bookstore called The Bookseller, which is one of the things I love about it, is that all the volunteers have different areas that we're responsible for. I started up their little horror section there, but it was great because a customer would come in and then we'd have the person who was like, oh, Victor is the best at classics, or Allison does our romance section. And so they could talk to the customer about what they like. So having, that type of flexibility is something I'd also would love. So hoping we get to that point. And no, I'm excited. It's
Yeah. It always struck me when I was a freshman in college. It was a very large state college, University of Maryland. And when we were doing orientation, the president of the university said, we want a well-rounded class, not a well-rounded student. And so, like, that's what it kind of feels like, where you like the staff is very well rounded, but each person, is free to have their very specific thing that they specialize in and talk about. So that's really cool.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's the first day that Twisted Spine is open to the public. You've had a very successful time. The doors have closed. What are you and your partner doing to celebrate or relax?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if we're going to be relaxing anytime soon. It's kind of full throttle pretty much here on. I'm hoping, honestly, if we can just like close down and like share a drink together, like I will be happy with that.
Yeah.
It's just been a lot moving forward, and I'm just hoping that like we have a good turnout, and a lot of it is just the enthusiasm's been there. The Kickstarter did well. We've had a good, people seem excited, and so as long as we can pay rent and stay open, I will be happy, because it's just like opening any small business is just a lot of upfront cost and a little bit of faith, because you know what your expenses are going to be, but you don't know going forward like what your revenue is going to be. And because we are something that is a little unique to the New York area, we don't really have, normally they're like, oh, you do your market research and like see what comparable things are. And I'm like, well, we don't have a perfect comparable, system, but we can, with a little luck, I think we'll do well. So
well, definitely plan to feed yourself, like get something sent in like end of the day, or have like a protein shake or something during the day, because I'm sure with all the excitement going around and like draining,
I'm sure that's probably the case right now too.
Yes.
Remember, it's like, oh, food, I have to eat at some point.
Yep. It's funny. I never thought I'd be the person who's like, oh, I forgot to eat. And then I'm like, oh, now I understand what they say is like people forgetting to eat. It's just, you're just so busy and you're making a million decisions every single day that you're just like, oh, yeah, that's a thing I also need to do.
Yeah. The smallest things, it's like where the exit sign is, right? All that it's just like everything has to be put somewhere when you're starting from scratch, and something.
The fatigue of just decision making repeatedly.
Yes.
I know as a teacher, I'm very tired of my name by the end of the school year, of people, saying, Mr. Allen, Mr. Allen, Mr. Allen. Or do you feel similarly? Because people are probably, Lauren, I need to know about this. Lauren, this. And you're like, could you just stop talking to me for a few seconds?
Yeah, like especially when we have like all the contractors in, or like, working on the shop, like it definitely can feel like I'm getting pulled in a million directions.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, it's also like, I'm very, very grateful that I have Jason as my partner. Like, the You and Me books here in New York City is just Lucy. And she opened at 28 all by herself. And I'm like, I don't know how you did that solo. Like even, sharing the load with another person, it's overwhelming. So I'm just extremely grateful to not be doing it by myself.
It's time for me to introduce my favorite movie quote after what you said. This is what I like to describe as from Lord of the Rings, or Frodo, or what am I thinking here? Bilbo Baggins. I feel like too little butter spread across too much toast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that just, when I'm weary after, I've done too much, because that's my status always. And that's what it feels like, where it's just like scraping. And I feel like, but you're so close.
Yeah.
You're so close.
And I'm sure you wouldn't want it any other way.
I know.
Now that you're doing these things. So it's like that mixture of, I am very tired and very grateful that this is happening.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
And we're all going to enjoy the hell out of it.
Absolutely. So before the store opens, how can listeners support and get the word out? And then, I know you don't have an exact time frame, maybe like a goal time to open.
Yeah. So right now, the best way to support is just spread the word, like let people know we're coming. I think we'd still have our Kickstarter late pledges. So if anybody wants a t-shirt, there's a couple of things that are still available on the Kickstarter that you can get, even though the Kickstarter has officially closed. And then I don't know when you guys are going to be posting this, but I will say that I think next week we are going to be announcing that, let me not get the date wrong, that our official opening is going to be September 6th. So stay tuned for our official announcement for that. But we will be having it, that if everything goes according to plan, that's going to be our opening date. And so if you're going to be in New York or like on 6 or later, then you can come stop by and see us. We just don't come on Mondays because we won't be open.